Yes, I am a Buddhist monk, and no, I'm not a vegan nor vegetarian. Um, there's a big misconception about Buddhist monks or what Buddhist monks eat, to be more specific. Um, and some of you, what I just said might come as a surprise because you thought monks are vegetarians or vegans, which is partly true and partly not true. Um, there are many different Buddhist traditions in the world. And if you go to Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, in these regions, monks eat uh, pretty much anything, not just vegetables. But if you travel to Eastern Asian countries like China, Korea, or Japan, you'll often see monks eating vegetables only, or hear that monks are vegetarians. So, uh, so what did Buddha eat? Like, how was it then? Um, I think this is from what I have read and heard. Um, at the time when Buddha was alive in India, about 2,500 years ago, um, at the time, Buddha and his disciples, they were basically hobos. They didn't have a home. They traveled around and they ate only once a day. And how they ate was they usually live in the forest, uh, but once a day for lunch, they would go down to town and they would knock on people's houses and they would beg for food. And if you're a beggar, then you should be grateful for whatever people give you. If you're a beggar and some people give you food, then you're like, oh, I don't need this, give me something else. Then you are kind of out of your mind, or at least rude. So at the time, the culture was that Buddha and his disciples, they would take whatever people gave them and bring all this food back to the forest, and they shared whatever they received with other monks and Buddha. So during that period, there was no specific rule of what uh, monks could eat. There were some minor rules about kind of things that monks weren't supposed to eat. Like if they saw an animal being killed, then they weren't supposed to eat this. And if somebody kills an animal specifically for monks, they weren't allowed to take this meat. So there were some specific minor rules about the things they shouldn't eat, but there were no vague or broad rule stopping monks from eating meat. And the southeastern Asian countries that follows more strict, older rules, they have taken this stance. So the monks in these regions, they don't always go down to town to beg for food, but sometimes they do, and they take whatever people give them. And usually, the lay people bring in food from outside, and these monks, they can eat whatever these people bring them. Story is a little different for the monks in the Eastern Asian countries following Mahayana tradition, because the monks that traveled from India to China, the first monks, they when they arrived in China, the Chinese people already had their own religions, and they weren't very nice to these monks from India, Buddhist monks from India, because they looked different. Uh, that was a new religion, and usually when this kind of thing happens, when something new comes in, there is usually a clash. So these Buddhist monks, they weren't welcomed in towns, and they weren't just not welcomed, but they were also somewhat persecuted, which meant they couldn't really beg for food, knocking on houses. So they lived in the remote mountains where Chinese people didn't bother them, and they had to survive by themselves, which also meant they had to prepare food for themselves. So at this point, these monks that were living in the mountains, they decided not to go after things that run away from them. Instead, they decided to eat things that do not run away from them when they try to catch them. So basically, plants. So that's how vegetarian culture in Eastern Asian Buddhism started, because they couldn't beg for food and because they had to prepare the food for themselves, by themselves. And that culture transferred to Korea and then to Japan and to other Eastern Asian countries. So in these places, Buddhist monasteries, they do not cook meat. And I guess that's why people believe, at least some people believe, Buddhist monks are vegetarians or vegans. And that's not completely wrong, I guess, but it's not completely right either. And Buddhist monks in this region, some of them stay strictly to vegetarian or vegan diet, but some of them do not. A lot of them don't, and I don't either. Um, so when I live in monasteries, when I'm at monasteries, then I eat whatever the monastery provide for me. So basically, pretty much a vegetarian diet. But when I go outside, maybe I visit home, visit my friends, or some kind of other events that I'm visiting, then I just eat whatever things there is or there are. So if I'm meeting my friends and they decided to eat animal products or order some meat, then I just eat with them. Um, and I don't think that's a problem or a sin. And I don't want to criminalize or vilify eating animal products, nor I'm endorsing how animal products is consumed in current societies. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is we need to be more aware, and we need to think a little bit harder than right now, because I see kind of tension between people eating whatever and people eating strictly vegetables or vegan diet. I don't think that's necessary. So people who, I think the problem between these two groups of people who are either advocating vegetarian diet and the other people who do not, it comes from somewhat misinformation or ignorance. We can think about this in, I guess, two main points. One is environment and one is ethical point of view. So a lot of people who care about the environment, they advocate a vegetarian diet or vegan diet over meat, which is understandable and somewhat true, but not completely. I guess the problems with animal products are very well known, so I won't go over them. But there are also problems with agriculture. There are many significant problems with agriculture. And I don't think it's possible to quantify which problems are bigger or which is better than the other. If you go out to the field or mountains, and if you collect or find whatever you can eat, and that if that's how you maintain your vegetarian diet, great, awesome. But nowadays most people, they go to supermarket and buy salads or other things, and I don't think that's in any way better than buying meat from supermarket, because all these products, whether it is animal products or vegetables, they all come from a very fragmented and segregated, specialized industry or industries, which means they all come from a very specific and clear purpose of making profit. I believe most problems with animal products comes from this mindset of making more money from selling animal products, and the same principle exists in agriculture. Just like how they farm animals in small spaces, feeding them grains. This industrialized way of agriculture is very problematic because there's a limited piece of land and they need to increase the amount of production. So they use fertilizers, pesticides, genetically engineered crops, and all these things, chemicals, they don't just go to the crops. A lot of it gets dissolved in rainwater and they go to water streams. And it affects the ecosystem in the freshwater streams. And where do these water go? They go out to the sea, and the sea ecosystem is also corrupted. So from environmental point of view, you can't just advocate vegetarian or vegan diet. And another point of view is ethical perspective. And it sounds like a stupid question, but why is killing animal worse than killing plants? Like, who decides that? I mean, as a human being, we feel more close to the things that look like us. And I think that's why there is tribalism, racism, sexism, all these things. But if you go broader from just human race, we feel more close to animals that look like us. So we feel more close to primates than mammals, than maybe reptiles, than maybe fish or bugs. And, maybe there are people who like bugs more than primates, but, I'm just talking about the general trends. And, like, who decides what is worse? Killing animals or vegetables. They all play certain roles in ecosystem, and nowadays people are finding out plants are actually more than what we used to think they are. The plants, they can communicate with each other, and they react to the environment in ways that we don't understand. Like, we don't see the plants' reaction to the environment, but they do, and we are finding them out. There are studies about vegetables or plants recognizing people approaching them, and some other animal like eating leaves and reacting to them. So just like how animal has natural instinct to survive, plants are pretty much the same way. They can also sense things, and they try to survive. We didn't know. We just thought, oh, plants are there, we'll just eat them. Because we didn't know. We were, in a way, ignorant. But we are not now anymore. And, just like there are animal rights activists, there can be plants rights activist. And, like, who can honestly say that's crazy? I mean, I'm sure there are going to be people that call these plants rights activists crazy, but I don't think that's crazy at all. Plants are very important in our ecosystem, and we should try to save them just like we try to save animal species. So, another problem that I have with the culture of food that we have nowadays is that, um, especially in the first world, people consider food as an enjoyment, something that should be enjoyable, and something that they should like. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I see just so many people throwing foods away because they don't like it or they don't feel like eating it, which is just so much waste. If you think about how much resources put into creating that food. And we are living in so much abundance that we don't really understand how precious these food are. Like, people do not respect uh, these food items in front of them. And they just see these dishes as an object of their desire, and they just devour them without really savoring it. And it's just, there's whole other problems that comes with consuming food, starting from diabetes, obesity, and many, many other health problems. Just this desire running rampant. We need to do something about that. So, what do I suggest? Honestly, I'm not so sure because there is only so much you can do in current society where everything is so specialized and there is only a little that you can do as a single person to the society. But I don't want to sound hopeless. I don't think that should stop us from doing something. I think growing something by yourself is going to be very interesting. Like, it's going to be a very meaningful learning experience. Like, just grab a pot and try to grow something leafy, basil, uh, some any small plants that you can eat. Or if you have place, or if you have a space and other resources that's necessary, maybe grow a chicken. You get eggs, and if you can try it, you can butcher it yourself. I mean, it kind of sounds crazy. This is coming from a Buddhist monk, but I don't think hunting is bad either. If you are consuming it as little waste as possible, and if you respect the animal, I don't think that's a problem. I guess I'm going a little sideways here, but what I wanted to say is be more uh, conscious about your choices about food, I guess, in this video. Because things are not as white and black as they seem. If you don't think hard, then things look black and white. They look so simple. But just like anything else in the world, nothing is that simple, black and white. So, this is me justifying eating meat. And if you have other questions, maybe I'll answer them. Bye.